Good evening and welcome everybody. Welcome to today's event by Research on Interdisciplinary Global Studies in collaboration with the Feliciano School of Business here at Montclair State University. And today's talk is on responsible AI and bias, and we have Rob Bernard from PwC with us as part of our Justice Entrepreneurship, Markets, Justice Experiences, and AI, which aims at interdisciplinary collaboration among faculty and students and focuses on the intersection of justice entrepreneurship and artificial intelligence. The series started in September of this year and will run all the way through April or May 2025, where we will feature experts and speakers on topics such as AI's impact on entrepreneurship, governance, and community services. But before we get started, and I'll pass on the mic or virtual mic here to my colleague, just a few words about RIGS for those who do not know RIGS. Again, it's Research on Interdisciplinary Global Studies, and it's a vibrant hub for innovative research and cross-disciplinary collaborations dedicated to address some of the most pressing global challenges of our times. And our work spans a range of critical themes, each designed to foster deeper understanding and especially real-world solutions, hence our talk quite timely today. Some of the key areas, just briefly, we focus on human rights and social justice, where we explore issues related to equity, inclusion, and the fight against systemic oppression and on a global scale. Then we have another theme on sustainable development, which examines the balance between economic growth, environmental preservation, and social equity. This includes research on climate change, resource management, and the transition towards greener economies. Again, you see with today's talk, there's certainly an overlap in some of these topics. Our fourth pillar is on global migration and displacement, which addresses the complexity surrounding refugee crises, forced immigration, and sociopolitical factors that drive displacements across regions. And then our fourth pillar is digital and technological transformations, where we critically assess the impact of AI, digital tools, and technology on governance, diplomacy, and social movements. And last but not least, we have also a topic sphere on peace building and conflict resolution, or engage with efforts to mediate conflict, foster reconciliation, and promote peaceful coexistence in post-conflict societies. Through all of these themes, RIGS strives to push the boundaries of traditional academic discourse, promotes collaboration between scholars, but also practitioners and activists. And we believe that by connecting these disciplines and viewpoints, we can really better address global challenges that we face today and hopefully provide meaningful and actionable insights. With that, I will pass it on to my dear colleague and friend and RIGS fellow this academic year, David Axelrod, who will introduce our esteemed speaker. And I wish you really a wonderful and enriching hour together here on this excellent and stimulating topic. Floor is all yours.
Hey, thank you very much, Arnaud. Rob Bernard is a director of risk modeling services at PwC, where he focuses on artificial intelligence, generative AI, and data science. One of his specialties is how businesses can use AI responsibly. Rob leads teams that develop analytics, models, and quantitative frameworks. Rob has developed analytics and models in a variety of industries, from simulating long-term land use and demographic change for small towns, to creation of machine learning models of fraud detection, to creation of innovative natural language processing techniques for measuring engagement, commitment, and understanding in online discussion forums. Besides his work in data science and simulation at PwC, he has developed counterterrorism analytics for the U.S. intelligence industry for Boeing, and forecasted demographic and economic change for the Detroit metropolitan region. He lives nearby in Montclair.
Thanks.
Terrific. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, everyone from Montclair State and Riggs and the whole program for having me. I'm going to talk about responsible AI and bias, and I work at PwC. Does everyone here know what PwC supposedly does? Supposedly? Okay, PwC is one of the big four accounting firms, and we do a lot of auditing, tax-related services. We also have a consulting practice as well. It has about 70,000 employees in the US and worldwide in 150 countries, about 350,000 employees. Most of the people, if you watch the Oscars about 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was something where they announced they announced La La Land as the best picture, and then they switched to Moonlight. Well, PwC was the company that screwed that up. So that's what we're known for mostly. We were the accountants that kind of counted the votes and gave them the wrong envelope. So, but we forget that for now. So maybe we're not so good at counting things, but actually we quite are. But what we really are, one of the things that PwC does, and there has really in the last 2 years, PwC has made a big bet on AI. And they've said, you know what? What is going to change the future, change transformation, business transformation. We all hear in business school about business transformation. What we think at PwC AI is going to do is transform transformation. I mean, transformation is just going to become different with AI itself. And to that end, PwC announced about a little over a year and a half ago, and I guess April 2023, that they're investing $1 billion worldwide for all its employees to upskill everyone on AI and generative AI. I would have asked 2 years ago this question in reverse, but I'm going to ask it the way who here has not used ChatGPT? Okay. Now, all the professors, close your eyes. Who here has not used, who here has used ChatGPT on an assignment? Close your eyes. Okay. Whoever has, if you haven't, okay, you can look now. It's an amazing tool. And if you've ever used it and tried using it, it's an amazing tool. It brings people who are not very good at something up to being quite good, people who are good up to great, people who are great up to amazing. It raises the ability to write, to do, to brainstorm ideas. But the issue with ChatGPT or Gemini or Llama or any of the large language models is that when you have to use it, you have to use it responsibly. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. How do I go to the next slide? Oh, that one. Okay. That works. Oh, it's because it's a PDF. Okay. So, so I'm going to do a show of hands here. So if you remember, and maybe not remember, ChatGPT came out into the world and was announced to the world pretty much exactly 2 years ago to the day in November. What year are we? In November 2022. So in that fall, they did a survey of personal automobile insurance companies. And I just want to, by a show of hands, what percent, now this is again, pre-ChatGPT and all its friends, what percentage use artificial intelligence or machine learning, if you know what that is, in their business? What percentages? Who thinks between less than a quarter? Okay. How about a quarter to about half? Okay. Half to about 3/4 and over 3/4. Well, what's interesting is for those in the online audience, it was about most people said between a half and a quarter. at that time, 90% of all the companies surveyed said they used AI and machine learning in their personal automobile insurance. It surveyed 193 different insurance companies. Most of the time, what they used it for was working claims, fraud detection, marketing. What is important here on this particular slide is the one thing I've bolded here. None of them used AI or machine learning to automatically deny a claim. So what does that mean? It means basically you have an accident, you make a claim. They don't just throw your claim through some AI processing thing and it says, nope, doesn't work. Don't pay this claim because of whatever reason. It always had a human at the end. That is, for good, better or for worse, that's changing. AI is becoming more and more doing things. And I want to be very clear on how I define what AI actually is. AI isn't just some model that does some sort of prediction. The way we've defined it at PwC, and I really like this, and I didn't know this before I got to PwC, is AI has to have three components. One is it has to sense, has some sort of sensor, it has to bring in information. It has to think, and I'm air quoting think. And then it has to act. Act means make some decision, pull some trigger, whether metaphorically or real or whatever it might be. Sense, think, act. And with that sense, that's what I'm going to consider what AI is. A model, a predictive model that says if you're this old and this gender and this racial identity and this ethnicity and you live in this zip code and everything, you are likely to do that. A model that someone has created to do that is not AI. It may be used in an AI system because that's the air quote think part of it, but it isn't actually AI itself. So that's important to talk about a little bit later. So that's basically what we're talking about in terms of automobile industry. Just another quick question here before I move to the next slide. Who here, besides ChatGPT, who here has used an AI system or believes that you've used an AI system? Okay, a couple people. Let me ask a second question. Who here has used autocorrect on their phone? If I don't see everyone's hands, I'm going to be very surprised. Autocorrect is AI, right? It's predicting the next word. You make a misspelling. It senses what you've typed. It thinks, it says, oh, they typed TEH. They probably meant the. I'm going to suggest the, and it suggests it for you. It acts on it by giving that suggestion. That is an AI system. Everybody uses it. Almost everybody likes it. There are certain words that I always type and I always get wrong, and it never gets it right. So sometimes I like 90% of it. But the point about it is that everybody uses it, and that's an AI system that we all use today itself. So one thing that I wanted to emphasize here is that we use AI, we want to use it what was called responsible. So I'm just going to throw this open in terms of what does it mean to use AI responsibly to you? Anybody who wants to answer, I have a professor that gives out chocolates to people who answer, but I know. Okay, well, if you don't, go ahead. Perfect. By the way, there's 100 right answers and no wrong answers. So. Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. You have your own workspace or whatever to our organization. Are you allowed, or does the system itself that you come up, if you've used, I'm not scapegoating you. Have you ever tried to push it to have it say something irresponsible, or see people say give toxic responses or anything like that? Do you have any idea whether those guardrails are on the system itself? Right. Yeah, of course. So sure, that's a one way of being responsible to your company, to protect your own company's, for instance, what PwC, or in fact any company, I'm sure your company, they initially told you, we're going to start using ChatGPT, but we have our own workspace. Do not upload client data to OpenAI, chat.openai.com. You will be in trouble, right? Because you get it to the open thing that you kind of use by yourself. You can just get on the internet and use. They suck in your data, but with your own company's proprietary, you have your own workspace, it's firewalled off from the rest of the world. So yes, that's one way. That's certainly absolutely no, right? It's entirely correct. There's a lot of different ways to describe responsible AI itself. Please. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Elaborate slightly on what that might mean in the world of AI. Because we use it every day. Guardrail is something we use to keep kids from burning their fingers or plugging their fingers into an electricity socket. But it has a very particular meaning which you just explained in terms of how it's implemented in your company. But there's quite a lot of technology actually that lies behind that, and even that technology is developing and transforming very quickly. Could you maybe explain that?
Sure.
Rob, just a quick question from here, because I'm auditing. Sorry, I'm here, Rob.
Okay.
When the audience speaks, could we use the mic so that the online audience can also hear the questions that come from? I like the interactive setup, but so this way no one will feel excluded. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to get to that in just a couple of slides, but there's so many different types of guardrails and so many different locations where those guardrails are put up. So okay. So AI usage, it's increasing. When this slide was originally created by somebody a while back, there wasn't any nearly the usage that there is today. One thing is greater transparency and accountability. Why don't people, this is a rhetorical question, I'm going to answer it myself. Why don't people trust AI? Why do people trust people? Okay, okay. Is there a soapbox here? Because I'm about to stand on it. If you asked someone you work with and they got the answer right and they were able to explain something 95% of the time right, a friend of yours or a colleague or whatever, would you trust that person almost most of the time what they say? 95% of the time they got things right. ChatGPT gets things 95% of the time right, but there's a lot less trust in it than there is in other people. And why is that? I mean, we can talk about that. That's a whole nother topic unto itself. But a lot of it comes down to explainability. People can explain their thought processes. How did I reach that decision? Oh, I heard this. I have this story, whether it's a data-driven storytelling or whether it's some logical sequence of events that got them to give you this answer. They can explain it. Generative AI, LLMs, large language models, as they're generically called, they do post answer explaining. They come up with the explanations afterwards because they think that's a good explanation. They don't really understand what they're saying. The explanation is kind of made up after the fact. And so that's not really a very trustworthy point of view. And so that transparency and that explainability and accountability is another reason why we have to really try to make AI more responsible. And then, of course, there's increasing risk as well. whether it's security, cybersecurity risks, there's economic risks, there's all sorts of different potential risks itself to using AI. And so I'm not going to go into this very deeply, but I wanted to just say that responsible AI itself is at all points of the value chain, from strategy initially to execution at the end itself. Excuse me. At the beginning, strategy, you've got ethics, you've got data, you have policies and regulations. At this point in the United States, we have a fair number of AI regulations that was just put in by the current presidential administration. The next presidential administration, it's unclear how many of those AI regulations will remain in place. We've been told that many of them are going to go away. But the regulation by the government in the US is variable. In Europe, it's there's much more in terms of regulation. The AI Act of last year, or early this year, regulates AI in terms of how it's used, what it can be used for. And so that kind of regulation is one thing. Governance themselves and compliance and risk management and the controls of how things are actually working. I'm not going to belabor it again. Responsible practices. This may not be at the compliance or regulation, but it is in terms of, you can see the headlines there. As I just talked about, explainability is one thing. Sustainability. AI large language models use a lot of energy and they use a lot of electricity. Many of that electricity is burned by coal. It's not environmentally friendly to overuse these large language models. It's getting better, but right now it's not the greatest thing. The thing that's highlighted up there, bias and fairness, is what I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about a little later. And again, privacy, security, safety, all the things that we've been talked about using the internet for the past how many ever years you're all alive for. Those are things that AI also contributes to. And then at the end, one thing that's, let me get to it on another slide. Let's go into it. So this gets at your question about guardrails. Responsible AI isn't just a point at which, okay, now we have to do the responsible thing here. It's through the whole process of developing any one of these systems itself. You can down at the bottom here, what's called the first line of defense itself. The people who develop the system itself, the model developers, the owners of the model, operations support, they are one of the first level of defense to make sure, is the data being collected properly? Is there ongoing monitoring of the system itself after it's deployed? Is the system documented well? So when they leave and somebody else comes in, they can fix and they know what's going on. That's one level of defense. And then you go to the higher level of defense, the compliance, legal, the independent review of models itself. Very important at that point itself, there are standards that have to be adhered to, or they don't necessarily, well, depends on what it is, right? The standards may or may not have to be adhered to, or there's just general best practices of standards themselves. One important thing in the whole AI world, especially putting these models together, is what's called red teaming. And red teaming is where someone comes in and intentionally tries to do what I suggested to you, is have your company's AI generate a toxic, racist, horrible response itself all they try to do is make the AI behave very badly or illegally or whatever it might be. And that kind of red teaming by an independent review team is very important because it tries to make sure this doesn't happen when the system is actually deployed itself. And then going up to the third line of defense is audits and ethicists. Formal audits. Is the system doing what it says it is doing? Not just are the results correct, but are the steps along the way a formal, like almost like a financial audit? Is the system doing what it's supposed to be doing? And then is the system behaving from more a philosophical or ethical point of view? And finally, again, external regulators, whether it's the Security and Exchange Commission or whether it's a similar commission in Europe, they are also ways. So the particular types of steps along the way is where all these particular as guardrails, in essence, are put together. I'm going to show you just basically, I'm not going to go through this very in depth, but when you're building, I was talking about responsible AI steps along the way. This is a 9-step process that we do. Other companies, other big consulting companies have their own processes. They're all kind of the same because there are best practices on how to deploy a machine learning or an AI system itself. And I think this isn't just for AI. This is for any business project in business school that you have. The most important step is not the technology that you're going to use and whether you're going to use Llama or Gemini or OpenAI or oh, maybe we don't need generative AI. We're just going to use some data science techniques or whatever. And people arguing about the technologies first before doing the first step in any particular business problem, which is defining what the problem is. That to me, and understanding the business that you're in, the context you're in, and the problem that your company, your client, whoever you're working with, what their issue is. And then, blah, 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 magic happens, magic happens, magic happens. And in the end, you deliver a solution, right? It's like 2 layers of a sandwich. We know what a sandwich is, basically. I don't know if a hot dog's a sandwich. It's a big debate, but you have a sandwich has one layer of bread on the top, 1 layer of bread on the bottom, and a whole bunch of stuff in the middle. We call that a sandwich. The top layer is the business problem. The bottom layer is the business solution. The stuff in the middle, it can be really different. It can have bacon, lettuce, and tomato. I was like, what's a BLT? Bacon, lettuce, and tomato, right? It can be a club sandwich. It can have tuna fish. It can have cheese. It can have hummus. It doesn't matter. It's still a sandwich because you've got a business problem on top and a business problem on the bottom. The stuff in the middle it can be almost anything. But that's what we're talking about here is that number 1 step in this process that we talk about is understanding the business problem because maybe AI isn't the right solution. But so look at number 2 here. We design the solution itself. Okay, we got the problem. We understand it, design the solution. Is this an AI thing? Shall we proceed with the solution itself? Okay, so that's a gate. It's called a gated. This is a gated system. At this gate, do we continue through or would we close the gate and end the process there? We deal with data. We get the data. We process the data. I'm not going to look up all of the data science techniques. I've done a lot of them. And then the fun part for the coders or data scientists is building the model itself. Did it work? Number 2, did a model meet our expectations? Did it work? Okay, it worked. Let's deploy it. We deploy it. We deploy it. We've deployed it onto a system. Do we now release it to the public? Do we make it in production? Do we execute in terms of BAU here? BAU meaning business as usual. As we go into our business usual operation. At any point of these black circles with the white numbers, there's a gate that the project can be scrapped at that point. And then what is, again, really important with either a data science solution or an AI solution itself is, does the model still work after it's been out in the field for months, years, whatever? Who here, let's pretend everybody had just got some amount of money in the lottery and you're like, oh, this is great. Would you go to a financial advisor to invest your money if the financial advisor's only source of data is, oh, oh, the financial advisor says to you, I'm using all the time during COVID as my base to do my models to predict what you're going to make money on. Who believes what happened in COVID was normal, right? So a lot of these particular model building cases is that if you build a model during COVID, it's very likely it's not going to work these days, even if your data science techniques were perfect. The environment itself has changed. With AI, part of the responsibility is to always go back and check, is the environment we built this AI system in still relevant today? Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's COVID really kind of screwed up a whole lot of, well, I mean, it screwed up a ton of things. Don't get me wrong, but for modeling people, anyway, I'm getting. Sorry, I was still on the soapbox. I got off of it now. Okay, next question. So one of the things we talked about, I'll back up here, was I was going to talk about bias and fairness and what it is. What is bias, or what is, okay, bias is one thing. We can all idea what bias might be. But what would you say unfair bias is? Anyone? Anyone? Not going to do it.
I know. Anybody online wanting to respond to that?
Yes, I certainly offered people to put stuff in the chat or in the questions, by all means.
Is there a chat?
There is a chat.
Yeah, there is a chat. I'm monitoring it. So if I see anything, I'll get at you, Rob.
Okay. So what's bias? So we don't talk about unfair bias. What is bias? We have a volunteer. I tossed you a piece of virtual chocolate.
When I think of bias, I think of looking at your information, but kind of skewing results based on your personal opinion or your personal agenda, regardless of what you're looking
at. Okay. Good. I'm sure we heard that online. So, yep, hopefully. Skewing towards your own personal opinion, or yeah, I mean that's a totally fine definition itself. Looked at the third chevron here. One of the ways that we've defined it, and I think many of others, is unexplained adverse outcomes for marginalized communities. However that community or characteristic is described, there is a adverse outcomes for that particular community itself. And what I'm going to talk about now is just literally talking about unfair bias in AI itself. So I'll just read this, and it's kind of got it wordy, but evaluating model fairness and identifying bias is predicated on the capacity for organizations to understand what drives decision-making in their AI models. So the context of AI, there are particular what are called protected attributes in any kind of system itself. And they're characteristics that potentially can be discriminatory, that are there, that if they're used in building an AI system, can cause bias and unfair bias. And it's a way to check for fairness itself. Race, gender being two of the more obvious ones. So the question itself is, okay, how do we get to that point, right? How did we get to a data set that has bias embedded in it itself? I'm going to have you think about that for a second while I talk about the fact that PwC and a whole bunch of other people aren't the only people who realize this. This came up from a little over a month ago. United Nations have an article about in Rwanda, there was girls attending a robotics boot camp. And one of the things that they had encountered in this was bias in, they were talking about bias in this robotics boot camp itself, gender bias specifically. And together, AI bias research is plentiful and ongoing. There's these things here, and I'm going to talk about this. This gets to your question is what is unfair bias? And I want to explain, because thank you for bringing that up. I've talked about this before, and I'll just say you're the first person who actually made that distinction. So I appreciate that because it's important. Here it is. Targeted medicine manufacturing. Now, these days, the Nobel Prize this year for medicine was the Nobel Prize for physics and chemistry and medicine all were AI related this year itself. Physics, if you've heard neural nets, the first person who kind of came up with the idea of neural nets and how to model it on a computer. Chemistry medicine was on creating an AI system that can predict the structures of proteins. And what you can get by predicting the structures of proteins is you can figure out how to make medicines better. So targeted medicine manufacturing or personalized medicine is someone has a particular disease. It's very rare. And it has to do with the lack of a particular protein. So what you can do with targeted medicine is maybe you can devise a new protein that binds with this one, and then I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, but that can bind with this in order to help the person alleviate their disease itself. That's AI, that's biased AI, because what they're doing is they are putting together an AI system that intentionally neglects the needs of a lot of people in order to put together a solution for a very small percentage of people. That's a biased system, but I don't think people would call it unfairly biased, right? Because you're really trying to help a particular very small subset of people itself. And this is this article was from the medical ethics journal itself that was published in 17th of October of this year. Since I prepared these slides, I'm getting low on time. Since I prepared these slides, I looked for recent articles on AI and bias, and just in the last couple of days, there are other things. Financial firms need to address AI-driven cybersecurity risks. There's again, being responsible in terms of AI cyber attacks, AI-driven, AI-created cyber attacks themselves. Google and again, another company itself, the Alliance for Innovative Regulation, talks about you really need to have humans in the loop here, which as we talked about, AI is just not making the decision on its own. AI's potential, again, in cyber offense, cyber attacks can lead to catastrophic risks sooner. Anthropic, which is one of the companies that makes these large language models like ChatGPT, they're very safety conscious, and they've just put out papers saying, hey, we're putting out these cool, huge models that do amazing things, but it's super important that you be responsible. So it's all over the place. It's just being talked about more and more, just because, as you know, if you've used ChatGPT, how powerful it can be. And there's external pressures on this AI usage itself. New York City recently passed a bill that if you send in a resume, many companies Nobody looks at your resume. It's looked at the AI. It looks for keywords in your resume itself, and you get put in the shredder, the virtual shredder, without a human ever looking at it because you didn't have the right words on it through AI. So that New York City says to residents, if you got AI dinged, you've got to be let know about that. Colorado insurance companies themselves have to say, here's where we got the information from. External data and algorithms you have to know where it came from. These regulations are happening all over the place. Again, Europe has this as well. I'm going to skip this just a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about one particular instance where these kind of AI biases come in to very prominent. And that's in lending programs or credit risk. Trying to assess what percentage you'll be charged on your credit card, what percentage you will be charged if you borrow money to buy a car or house. You are not, and this is where AI systems can do a great job of predicting stuff, but have to be very careful about the particular variables they use to do these particular predictions themselves. Protected attributes, race, gender, not income. Income's actually kind of important for determining that. But not only do you have to watch out for these particular types of data itself, these data columns, as it were, characteristics themselves, but you have to watch out for things that are highly correlated from a statistical point of view with these particular attributes. The most notorious one is zip code. From a zip code, we say, oh, well, we took self-identified race out of the data set, so therefore our data set isn't biased. But we have zip code, and we know that this zip code is this percentage of this ethnicity and this percentage of this ethnicity, and it's more or less a proxy for race itself. In many cases, not perfect, but in many cases, it's highly correlated. So when they're building these AI systems and trying to define, is this fair, is this biased or not, they have to not only look at the obvious characteristics themselves, but also these very correlated ones. Does that make sense what I'm talking about? Yep, okay. So we want our systems themselves to be fair, right? So what is fair? What's fair mean to you? When is something fair or unfair? And the second question, if you don't, pretty much all of you, I bet, as toddlers said, that's not fair. So at that point, you had an idea of what fair meant, right? Okay. They got something that I didn't get, right? They were given an opportunity that I didn't have, right? They got the Minion and Happy Meal and I didn't. I got Gru, right? Okay, that's not fair, right? So the point about it is that you can define fair as, it's kind of a nebulous way, but there are ways to statistically define what fair actually means. I'm not going to go into all the statistics, but that is an important question. And one of the things that we do when we evaluate these systems themselves is try to define what fair means, detect the bias itself, and then intervene somehow and fix it, whatever it might mean. So what are these fairness definitions? Which ones fits the purpose of our particular system itself? How do we do, excuse me. How do we detect the bias? How can we see the bias in the system itself? And how do we adjust our algorithms to take care of these biases themselves? This is a whole nother issue, but I raise these issues to let you know that people who are creating AI systems, who are creating many of these AI systems, contend with this every single day. And in terms of, looking at your future careers themselves, you say, oh, I'm not a technologist, I'm not a coder, I don't want to go into AI. But if you're in a system like this, if you're in a lecture series like this, we need ethicists. We need people who understand social justice to come in there and talk to the technologists and say, hey, that's not fair. That's biased. That's not ethical. So we're looking for people like that itself, rather than just people who can do coding, right? I think it's an important distinction themselves. So here's a really interesting thing itself. Fairness is not, I kind of misspoke. It's not what do they say, a fuzzy concept. It's a social construct. What's fair in this culture is maybe unfair in another culture. It can be defined for thinking mathematically. Here's a whole bunch of different ways: statistical measure, predicted outcomes, actual outcomes, causal definitions, regression, natural language processing, all these different particular data science ways of defining what fair means. And again, I can do the math, but I want an ethicist. I want someone who's advocates for the marginalized communities to be sitting next to me, saying, did you consider, you got zip code in there? Did you consider, in order to predict someone's, given their, percentage on their loan, you got zip code in there. You understand that is a protected attribute because of oh yeah, okay. Kind of things like that. Again, bias detection. The main source of bias is not necessarily, it's part of the columns are important, but one of the real main issues is the content of the data itself. Here's an example. I don't have it in here as a slide, but I can give it to you. I don't want to unfairly besmirch a company. So I'm going to say it's a large technology company because I'm not 100% sure which company it was now. But they created a facial recognition algorithm. And the idea of it is that can they detect, primarily for criminals, crime detection, can they detect, all right, here's a face we see in a security camera. Here's a bunch of suspects we brought in. Oh, the face in the security camera matches that guy. We're going to arrest him. Okay. And so a lot of these, people unlock the phone with their face, right? These days, right? So there's facial recognition in that as well. Another way you use AI, and you may not realize it. But the itself is that when they train the models, teach the models how to do facial recognition, they use a whole lot of pre-image generation days. They hold a whole lot of photographs of, all right, this is this one person, and here's 3 other pictures of this person. All right, this matches this and this and this. They're all the same person. How do you mathematically manipulate it to figure it out? So they train it, and they train this with thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of images themselves. And they come up with, it does a great job at overall, it recognizes, and I'm guesstimating here, I'm pretty much 92% of the time it gets the match right. A novel picture of somebody and the face in the database. 92% of the time it gets it right. The difference between people with light skin and people with dark skin on recognition was vastly different, right? Lighter skin, much higher percentage of match, 96, 97%, something like that. People with darker skin, was down in between 70 and 80%. So what does that mean from a criminal, from a crime? Oh, here's what we saw on the security camera. There's a suspect comes in. They both have darker skin. Oh, it matches. It's that guy. But the facial recognition technology was not that good because it got it right in the training data only about, oh, it was like 70, 80%, something like that, percent of the time. Well, a person with a lighter skin, 95+% of the time. Is that fair? No. Is that biased? Absolutely. Why? The question is why? Is because when they were teaching the model, they had they had multiple times more white, light skin faces than they did dark skin faces. So the model got really good at discriminating between different light skin faces, but dark skin faces, it was not nearly as good at. There was a bias in the data set the model was taught on, and that's the most common way of finding bias in the system itself. What time is it? Okay, you got about one more slide left. So we can't remove bias from models, but we can make it fair. We can add extra data. We can make sure the size of the training sets, the teaching sets between the two models are approximately the same. These models can be trained to become bias aware. We can't remove all bias from models itself, but we can be much more cognizant of what is there itself. So I'm going to end there, but I want to just get back on a soapbox again. Soapbox again. I'm completely serious when I say that if you've been following the whole thing with ChatGPT and what it can do, people are following about doing coding. You just have to specify a problem well and it'll write the code, Python code for you. I write R and Python code and work. I'm like, well, it's a lot easier, it's faster if it writes it for me than right. These knowledge-based jobs about being able to write code and put together nice slides and presentations and summarize articles are all going to be, over the next few years, going to be swallowed up because the ChatGPT and OpenAI and Llama and Gemini and Anthropic, they're all going to be doing it just as well as. What isn't is being able to have that essentially human aspect of ethics, of understanding people, of communication with each other. So in your careers, just keep that in mind that, oh, I met a techie. Well, a lot of techies, their jobs are going to be augmented by these machines that can do it just as well as they can. But you being human and keeping those things in mind, that's still a long way off. So thank you.
Now, we've got about 10 minutes, right?
Sure.
For Q&A. So now maybe you could check if there are questions online as well.
Yeah, I reached out to them, and so I said they should put some in the Q&A box, and we can probably also elevate them into the room. I haven't done that, but I think I should. Yeah, I can allow people to talk. So if you prefer directly addressing Rob, by all means, so raise your hand, and we'll make sure you can join us here. And if there's ice, Rob, let me know. I can't see into the room. I certainly have a question for you. It was fascinating, but I want our students and participants to have first dibs here. But if there needs to be a question, I have plenty.
Showing your age, man. Yeah.
The story itself is very interesting. We're on a planet where it was dying, there's only one person left. And the society has developed technology to the point where they can basically just use your mind and use the manifest in the physical world, whatever it is. And so it's this realm of just imagine technology as far as it can go. It's read your mind, make it happen. And society cannot survive. It cannot survive because people getting used to not having to think and reflect, it just immediately went to their limbic system, their emotions, their unconscious emotions, and manifested. So I'm going to ask you, Rob, where do you think AI will have to add guardrails so that, one, it doesn't immediately go to our unconscious, and two, what is going to be required of us to make sure that we're not blind with what's going on in our own unconscious?
Can I pass? um,
So, Rob, it seemed like the audience said, can you maybe rephrase the question that Dax was asking you so that the audience online can also follow?
Sure, I can try.
You can make it up in your own AI, right?
Yeah,
Since you wanted to pass.
how can we ensure that AI doesn't go to places in our unconscious mind that beyond the knowledge conscious stuff that it does now? How can we make sure it doesn't go beyond to our unconscious thoughts, desires, and have those, I don't know, manifest in the world itself? Well, okay. I'm going to be a pessimist here and say, I don't know if we can stop it. We're getting to the point now in terms of AI, finally, the GPT world and the large language model world is starting to slow down in terms of how fast it's developing and how fast but as long as you just add more stuff and more chips and more things, it's still going to get better. It's been better itself. I think in terms of guardrails, we have to be absolutely committed to protecting our own privacy, and be guardians of ourselves, not to give too much away to, not to give too much decision making away to the GPT. And for the most part, you're going to be just as right as a GPT itself. So don't necessarily let the machine make all the decisions for you. I think if you get to that point of being, I'm going to air quote, lazy here and say, have the machine write all your papers for you or make all your presentations for you or do all your bullet points. Yeah, it does a great job, but your brain is just going to just go off into thinking for yourself. Now, not to say that working with any kind of chat GPT to create a presentation, it does a great first draft. I use it all the time. I mean, not ashamed to admit that PwC encouraged us to do it because we can get things done faster. But then I have to go through and say, yeah, that makes sense. Now I need to reorder this and this. Can it get to the point of doing that? If we just let everything happen, you end up, what happened was like the first 6 months of ChatGPT were, I think it was Michael Cohen, Trump's first lawyer, that had his legal briefs, had ChatGPT do its legal briefs, and it was making up random case law that didn't exist in his legal briefs, and he got in big trouble for that. I think that was it, allegedly. I'm going to add allegedly here because it doesn't.
He wasn't the only lawyer.
Yeah. So I guess to me, critical thinking, and also, unless it's a life or death or a serious situation, allow yourself to be wrong. Allow yourself to make a mistake, because, my son was a big chess player, and we talked about wins and you win a game, you have W's and L's, right? Talk about in sports too. Let's get a W, right? Well, I was very, this is very nerdy, but I was very kind of point to my son and I said, it's not wins and losses, it's wins and learns, right? The L stands for learn, not lose, because you can always learn from your mistakes. So allow yourself, if you're working with AI, to make your own decisions, to fail. We talk about in business. I'm sure you say that companies that thrive these days allow their employees to make mistakes and allow their employees to fail. Not to the point of bankrupting the company. Nobody wants that. But small failures, you learn from it along the way. So instead of, who here has seen Wall-E, right? Wall-E. Why don't you just sit in the chair and just let the, get fat and let the world just run around the table itself and do whatever you want. That's letting the AI take the world from you rather than you keeping it for yourself.
Rob,
That's a
we have
long-winded
one
answer to say, be true to yourself.
Rob, we have one question that sort of ties in with this when you said that we really need to protect our privacy. How can we teach our a new generation who are so used to go public with their private lives to be a bit more careful? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm
that might be a learned situation.
Yeah, I think you may have to learn from that. Might be a learning from your own mistake kind of point. When somebody outs your address on the internet or whatever it might be, my younger son wants to give somebody's address overseas, and I was like, no, you don't give address overseas to somebody else. That might require learning itself. I don't have a really good answer for that. I wish I did. I'm sure that there are those in, education that have better answers than and I don't want to speculate on that. I apologize on that.
And I know we're sort of want to stay within the time limit, but perhaps you can do a question that relates directly, since you are the director of climate risk modeling. Maybe you can give a bit of a sneak preview, if you will, that ties in with your presentation here. Where did you come across this tension between fair bias, when you do some of the climate risk models? Where are some of the challenges that you've come across with your team in that type of
okay.
research?
So up until about several months ago, I was actually ran a climate change team at PwC, and I had 12 PhD climate scientists working for me, developing large-scale climate models, predicting weather disasters, basically floods, wildfires, droughts, globally at a very small scale, not just a zip code or a state or a country, but literally down to a 10 meter by 10 meter spot. What might happen here in the next 30 years? What is the chance of a flood? What is the chance of a heat wave or whatever it might be? When you give that information to insurance companies, who's going to be the most, we're going to buy that information the most? Are insurance companies, right? Insurance companies that go to that insure houses in the deltas of Louisiana, or on the shore in Miami or in North Carolina, right? Well, you tell them that there's pretty much a 40% chance that the house is going to be destroyed in the next 30 years. Well, what are they? They have two possibilities. One, they charge an outrageous amount for the insurance, or they don't insure them. Is that fair? Or is it like buyer beware? Well, you shouldn't have bought a house at sea level on the shore in a hurricane prone area. Too bad for you. I mean, that's in essence what the insurance companies are saying, right? If they don't insure the places. So, so we have to this is a technocrat in me says we want to give them the right information. The humanist in me says, "Gah, those poor people are going to get their insurance things going to get," but can't. Yeah.
What worries me about insurance companies, car insurance companies, is the use of these apps. So I am insured with a particular company, it shall remain nameless. But they now have an app that I have to install, and they track the way that I drive. And I've spoken about this in my classes. I think young men as a group, and particularly young men who are neurodiverse, because their brains, young men, that they mature later. But also, Chris, but also people who are neurodiverse and maybe have movement disorders. And I say this because I drive very safely, and yet it penalizes me if I suddenly have to stop. And that's a safety thing, right? So I don't know whether, I'm sure you don't have all of the answers, but I think that's a class action lawsuit waiting. A good group of personal injury lawyers, or whatever they call it.
Is it a class action lawsuit for the group of people who feel that they're being unfairly? Yeah, not just personal, and even if you're not injured. Yeah. Until all the cars are communicating with each other. And so your app knows that, oh, it connects to the app with the guy that stopped short in front of you. It says, oh, it's his fault. So, okay, no fault. So, but again, that's down the line years, maybe not tomorrow.
Rob,
yes, sir.
If we have one more question from the audience that might also quite be interesting in terms of liability, right? We haven't really touched upon sort of the military use. You might not do this type of stuff, but we're all familiar with sort of the drone strikes. And you mentioned, right? A responsible AI always has these mechanisms of layers of defense. And so in that time where you have a designer of the algorithm and then a commander who gives the order eventually to a soldier, so that deploys these AI guided weapons. So how do we then determine individual liability or the wrong use of AI? Any thoughts? I know you might not have solutions.
I have a lot of thoughts. So I mean, I could literally speak another. And Dax knows why I know why he's laughing. Okay, so I'm going to give a 2-minute answer, but I could spend a lot of time talking about this. And,
thank you.
So when I was working for Boeing, I was a contractor to the U.S. intelligence industry. I had a very high top secret clearance. I worked in Boeing doing counterterrorism work after 9/11 for about 10 years. Later in Boeing, I worked in Boeing Defense. We all know you've heard Boeing has problems now. But half of Boeing's revenue comes from commercial airlines, what you fly in on United and whatever airline. Half of it comes from defense because they make fighter jets, they make things that swim, they make weapons. I worked on the Boeing defense side. I worked in their autonomous systems division. What is autonomous? Things making decisions on their own. And I was the chief data scientist of the autonomous systems division. Boeing makes things that fly, things make decisions on their own, and weapons. Now, I can't talk about what I did, but you can draw your own conclusions. So that experience, and again, this was early before any of this AI. This was, 10 years ago or so. That experience got me into responsible AI. What are the ethics of, I know I kind of, early on, I said pull the trigger literally or figuratively. What are the ethics of killer robots, right? As you're saying, whose responsibility is it? Is it the algorithm designer that said, well, that I interpret that as an enemy action and I will fire? Is it the responsibility of the military commanders who deploy those? So these are all questions that still have not been decided. And until, and I'm not going to be optimistic about this, when it is the point where we are having killer robots out in the field, it will happen, maybe not by the US, but maybe by some other company, other country. Who is going to be responsible for them with the first time they kill an innocent person? I mean, it's a huge question. There's a lot of accounts, nonprofits. One of them is called Stop Killer Robots, is the name of a nonprofit that does this. There's like, anti-landmine work as well in terms of intelligent landmines that can detect who's walking over them and who isn't. So all those questions still have to be decided itself. But honestly, it is the reason I got into talking about responsible AI itself. So. On that happy note.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rob. It was a pleasure. And I'm glad we made it happen so that online audiences and your real live audience in the classroom were able to join you today. On that note, I would like to thank you in the name of all of our collaborators and Driggs, and keep up the great work, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.